Okay, thank you for joining me. Welcome to Turn Dog Talks 2. I'm delighted to be joined today by Natalie Sisson, who is the Suitcase Entrepreneur. And she's someone who I follow closely online. She's always coming up with some amazing tips on her blog. So, Natalie, thank you very much for joining us. And from Amsterdam, I believe.
Yes, indeed. I love the way you said entrepreneur. It's very cool.
Yes, I can't escape my Yorkshire ways, but it usually plays off in my advantage in the global world. Everyone else just thinks I've got an annoying Yorkshire accent in this country, but in the wider scheme of things, it's not too bad. So thank you for joining me, we're both very hungry, so I think we're going to try and speed through this and get away and get some food.
Yes, cool.
So can you please start us off with just telling us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
All right. Well, basically, I've worked out that I sell freedom to people because that's what I represent. I literally do live in my suitcase and I travel the world and I run my business from a laptop, a smartphone, and with an internet connection. And people say, what do you do? And I like to say that I help people to create freedom in business and adventure in life because I very much think in this day and age, there is no reason why you can't be running your own business, whether it's a side business, whether it's full-time. And there's certainly no reason why you can't run it from just a laptop. You don't need an office. You don't need a lot of stuff. You don't need mortgages, cars, printers, etc. You can have a virtual team working for you. You can use social media, as you know, online tools and technology to run it from anywhere. All you need is a really great idea and the determination to see it through, and obviously a market that wants to pay you what you're worth. You're a fan of Chris Gillibo as well, and I always like the way he says that, you need something to sell, an audience to buy it, and a way of getting paid. Like, it's not rocket science.
That was one of my favourite sections from a $100 startup, and the idea of creating a package rather than a product and stuff. So it was fantastic, and I think that's superb because I try and do as little work at home as possible. I love to write in coffee shops and in libraries and on trains, just because I like to be inspired by the passing world, and you do it in the most wonderful way because you don't only just do it in the same coffee shops day in day out, but you do them in different countries, different continents, and you just roam the world. It's superb, and I am very jealous. So, fantastic. And I love how you say that you sell freedom. This is fantastic.
Yeah, I just came up with that recently because I was talking to quite a few clients and they're like, I'm starting to get frustrated with family and friends and people who don't quite understand what I do. So we were coming up with a number of ways to say, like, I'm a full-time traveler or I'm a professional travel hacker and just some silly things. But I honestly think that what I represent to people is, it's not me, it's about them. They can see a little bit of themselves in me and they feel that, you know what, I could have more flexibility and freedom in my day, even as a 9-to-5er. I just think a lot of the traditions that we have right now are just so completely stayed and out of fashion, and we need to get up with the trend. So,
well, I'm loving the minimalistic approach. I think it's the way to go.
yes.
I interviewed Jim Hopkinson fairly recently, and he's someone who's starting to do that more, traveling to places like Thailand, and I think it's such a fresh approach. And I think we will see more people do it and continue to thrive. So fantastic for doing it. And I'm intrigued. How long have you been doing this for? How long have you been a nomad?
It's a good question. So I didn't even really explain what my business is, but I can come back to that. Essentially, since 2006, I left New Zealand, where I'm from, and I have been traveling and living in places ever since. So I lived in England for 2.5 years, Canada for 2 years, Buenos Aires for around 6 months, and Argentina. And then since last year, really, I've been full on just traveling and not really having a base. I think the longest I've stayed anywhere was a couple of months, and it's always been broken up by traveling. So this year in particular as well has been really full on with a bike trip across Africa and back and forth across the continents. So I would say probably full time coming up. My blog and my website, my business, the Suitcase Entrepreneur, is coming up to 2 years this December, which I'm really excited about.
Fantastic. And it's so good to be speaking to a Kiwi because my brother-in-law is a Kiwi and my sister lives in Wellington.
Oh, that's where I'm from.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's such an amazing city. It's so lovely. And I went there for the wedding and it was painful having to leave. I was like, no, I want to stay here. So my sister, very lucky indeed. So yeah,
It is
Wellington's a cool town.
paradise for sure.
Beautiful, beautiful country. And I'm excited for The Hobbit too, which obviously
Oh
is
yeah, comes out today, I think, in New Zealand.
really get a sneak
Red
peek.
carpet in
Nice.
Wellington. Yep.
Very cool. Well, that's a side note, but let's get into the main part of this interview. And for those who don't know, this is in aid of my book, The Successful Mistake, where I am interviewing entrepreneurs about the mistakes they've made and how they've overcome them. So I want you to think back about one of the biggest mistakes you've made in your business world. And I can imagine yours could be very interesting because you've maybe done it in numerous different countries. And more specifically then, how you overcame it. So to begin with, Natalie, can you just let us know what that mistake was?
Yeah, it may be a really obvious one, but for me, it was not fully believing in myself as an entrepreneur from the get-go. So I'm maybe, other people have said that, but I really look back on it now and I was like, what the hell was I waiting for? Because when I started the Suitcase Entrepreneur, which at the time was a different name, I literally, all I had was a blog. I had a blog and nothing, like no business idea really, but I figured I had talents and I had skills that I could sell to people, whether through consulting or coaching. But I just took way too long to figure out exactly what it was that I offered and to then offer it. So I did all this community building, which was absolutely incredible and essential. But I just took too long to get to the point of making money and believing in myself. So I just see that it was a big, big setback for me because probably it put me back about a year. If I'd gone on with a bit more of a strategic approach and had some coaching and mentoring early on and got a lot clearer on what I could do, I just think I would be even more fast forward into my business now. I mean, it's going really well now, but that critical lack of, oh my God, I don't really think I'm an entrepreneur. What am I going to do? Was probably one of the biggest oversights on my behalf when I started.
And it's so interesting you say that because I think the stereotype for an entrepreneur is that they have an abundance of confidence. Like if there's one thing that entrepreneurs have, it's confidence. They believe in themselves, they believe in what they can sell and how they do it. They just think, there might be risk, but they just don't believe it's there. But I think the more entrepreneurs there are in the world now, and we're into sort of a world where I guess the average Joe is becoming like a self-employed, self-made man/woman. And not everyone has an abundance of confidence. I know I'm not one of these people. I certainly have a great deal of self-doubt. I know a lot of writers who do, where you take a step back and you have to push yourself forward. And I imagine a lot of people reading my book in the end will actually be one of these people where they've got an idea, it might be great, but they just have something holding them back. So is that kind of what you felt like at the time? Something was just invisibly holding you back?
Yeah, and it was me. Surprise, it was totally me because I'd been a co-founder of a technology company. That was my first experience into the full-on entrepreneurial and tech world, which is even harsher because it's very fast-paced. I mean, I love it, but everything's about, investors, failing fast, failing often, really competitive market. So I loved that because it gave me this huge grounding for what it was like. But when I finally went, okay, I'm going to go and do my own thing, I literally did just have a blog. But I think I was like, oh my God, this is all up to me. And one, it was the fear of kind of leaving that behind because my business partner and I got on really well. He just realized that I loved my blog more. But two, it was, it's a big scary thing when you start your business, and let alone not just starting it, but when you're actually in it. Even 2 years later, it can still be times when you doubt yourself. And I do have a lot of confidence. Most people who meet me would probably say that, but I didn't believe in myself as an entrepreneur because frankly, it was my first time going it on my own fully. It wasn't that much of a setback, but in the scheme of things, there were definitely things that I could have done to make that journey and transition easier. So I got in my own way. It was a limiting belief from my point of view that people are actually going to value what I do. They're going to actually pay me, and that I can set up a viable business that will be able to scale and grow. None of those thoughts really were ingrained in me at that point. So I've done a lot of work since then.
and I think people can quite often look confident on the outside, but it doesn't always tell the full story on the inside. And you can put a mask on, but it doesn't always tell the full story. So when did it start to change? When did you begin to feel more confident and have a bit more belief in where you were going as an entrepreneur and in your business as a whole? Was there a particular point?
I think there was actually. I mean, when I got my first consulting client, that was definitely a bit of a boost. I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. Somebody sees me as somebody with a skill set that they want to pay for and quite a lot of money. But I ran a series of social media workshops about 6 months into going solo. And I absolutely filled the workshops, and they were spaced out over a month. I did 4 of them. and I made like $10,000 during that time.
Wow.
Granted, I tapped into some government funding, but like the workshops were full, they were brilliant, the feedback was excellent. And it was the first time that I really went, oh my God, like I know this stuff. Or even if I don't know it massively well, I know it much better than the people that I'm teaching, and they value that in themselves. And I'm a good teacher, and I can put it in a way that's not complex to them so they learn. And the feedback that I got from those people was just fantastic. And I kind of came out of that going, wow, this is a skill that I have. And therefore, one, not only the profit, but two, the feedback and the outcome of it was something that really turned me mentally and going, okay, I've got this. Now I've got to step it up a notch.
Fantastic. And earlier you mentioned about mentors and getting maybe some coaching and things. Is that something you did at a later date, or in hindsight, looking back, you maybe wish you had from the get-go?
In hindsight, I would have if I had the money at the time, because I was like on my ass. I would have invested in a coach. I actually did the mentoring quite early on. I joined what was the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs in Vancouver, and they had a great mentoring program. It was like $100, and you got matched up with a mentor. And I threw myself into that, and I found that really handy. Just their support and the networking groups. I probably could have done even more. I was also looking out for particular mentors. There were quite a lot in the tech side that I'd become friends with. So that was useful. But in terms of coaching, I would say to almost everybody, it's just so worthwhile to invest in it. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a coach now, but I see people who, even if they don't have the money and they do it from the beginning, you kind of leap forward about 6 months of where you'd be if you were trying to steal and do it by yourself, because they give you these instant answers that they've learned and they've gone through, and they can just give you this clarity on where you're going if they're a great coach. And that's so valuable. Like, it will return itself 10 times over if you find the right coach and go with them early on when you're just developing all your processes.
And this is good because this isn't like a huge mistake which has cost you tens of thousands of pounds, and like you had to like sack employees and you were living on the breadline like some mistakes are. This is a very incremental small mistake, but it can have a huge impact on your business going forward. Obviously this is a very normal startup mistake where people think, I can do it on my own, I don't have enough money right now, so I need to cut the cost. But it keeps you boxed in, and it stops you from blossoming maybe a year early, maybe 2 years, maybe 5 years. It might even stop you from getting to that next level period.
Exactly. And I was just watching, I'm really excited. I've just bought Stephen Pressfield's book. I think it's called Turning Pro.
Turning Pro.
And I just saw an interview on him the other day, and I was like, wow, like it was all about, when are you going to start taking yourself seriously and start developing habits that make you more of a pro? So a lot of it is to do with mindset. Like, for example, as a freelancer or as an entrepreneur who works from home or cafes, I know a lot of people who just mill around in their pajamas in the morning and they kind of get started and they do all this. And I'm always like up at a normal time, not necessarily corporate time, but up at a good time. I get straight into my, like I get dressed, I get showered, I get presentable if Oprah was to knock on the door and an angel investor. And just so that I can go straight out to a cafe or I can work on my work. But it's so important. That may sound like a really small thing, but just all those little things of turning pro are about habits that you consistently put in place. Installing the right systems, taking time to learn stuff, like hiring a virtual assistant, hiring a coach or mentor, really just like going, okay, well, I'm going to do my absolute best at everything that I do. And I love listening to the interview because I've recently done even more of that in my own business, taking stock of my financials, really putting in a 2013 strategy, going back through everything, my sales funnel, just really setting it up with a solid foundation. And this is 2 years down the track, right? I know all this stuff, I coach this stuff, but it's very different to take your own advice and put it into place. So I really enjoyed listening to that Turning Pro interview.
Was it the Marie Folio interview by chance?
Yeah.
I listened to it myself yesterday. It was fantastic. And anyone who is kind of new into this game, I certainly recommend Stephen Pressfield. He is quite the inspiration.
Yeah, I did. I read his Do the Work, and I love that. It's just like, do the work. It couldn't be any more obvious. It's like, you might as well just sold the book cover.
Get it done. Absolutely. So, do you think it's kind of changed your mindset? Because it sounds like this mistake of not taking yourself, I don't want to use the word seriously, but that little bit of self-doubt, that self-belief, which was maybe lacking in the beginning, it sounds like it's made you a pro. you look back and think, I didn't quite take myself seriously enough. Now I do. So when you start a new project now, we were talking earlier, you're thinking of working on a new book. Are you automatically thinking, right, I don't even want to do everything myself. I want to get the virtual assistant. I want to get the coach and the publicist and all these things. Where the money is available, are you just straight away horses for courses? Who can I get involved? And,
Yeah, I mean, I already have a virtual assistant. I'm just hiring a project manager as well. So for this, naturally, yes, I will speak to either an editor about my book. I will definitely have people proofreading it. I will get a professional person in to do the great design. I will likely even get a mentor on it. I've got a few people lined up who have recently published their own books who have already stepped up to help and just talk to me about it. And I won't get an agent, but I'll probably get somebody who can pitch to the media around this as well, in a great way and sort of get the word out and help me when it comes to promoting it. So that I already know I'm going to invest in.
and I think it's obviously easier when you've made a bit of money and you're a few years down the line, but people even in the beginning can do this to an extent by just networking, getting out there. And
Oh
it
yeah.
sounds simple, but ask the question. You'd be
Oh,
amazed how many people will actually say, yeah, I will mentor you, or I will give you a hand, I will give you some tips. And that could be the difference between your book getting off the ground or not, or replace the word book with project, product, service,
exactly.
absolutely anything.
And just an example to that, I recently launched, you may have seen it, my $100 change program, inspired by Chris Guillebeau's $100 change that he gave out
Absolutely.
world domination. And that was the first project in my entire history of creating and launching products and programs where I asked people for help. And I didn't just ask one person, I asked like 100 change makers to step up and be part of it. I put it out there when it was messy and it wasn't perfect, which is very unlike me. I asked people for their input on how to make it better. I put it out there when I just wasn't, like totally sure, and that was very different for me. And the difference in just doing that and looking a little vulnerable, but also having a real passion for what you're doing was incredible. The amount of people who stepped up and supported it. I got over 120 change makers on board in 3 weeks. I had people give me over $10,000 in giveaways to support this nonprofit initiative. And in terms of, talking about reaching out to networks, it's really strengthened that aspect so that I know even going down the track, I have all these wonderful people at my fingertips that I can connect with and help and be helped by. So it's such a big one for entrepreneurs is reaching out and asking for help and looking like you don't always have it all together, but you do have a plan and a vision for what you're doing.
Fantastic. And I'm going to shamelessly encourage everyone watching this to go and check out the $100 change. I've been following it, and some of the people involved doing the guest posts and just being involved in the community, absolutely some fantastic people. And yeah, it's fantastic. And I think you're doing a great thing there. And I think over the coming months, it's going to be a very exciting endeavour.
Yeah, definitely. It's scholarship time right now. So I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to seeing what people submit.
It should be a good time. It's exciting. I've certainly enjoyed your journey so far. So it's fantastic, and I love this story because it isn't a huge mistake. It isn't one of these life shattering mistakes, but sometimes the small one, which you don't even notice is there, can make the biggest of changes, and it can change your mindset if you know what to look out for,
Mhm.
and it can just change how you look at your business completely. So, what would you, if you were to offer someone with a bit of an advice who's just starting out, what should they look for in terms of if changing this mindset? If you've got a bit of self doubt, were there a couple of things that snuck up on you and made you think, I need to get my ass in gear? Or...
Oh, yeah, all the time. I guess my biggest piece of advice to people is to just do it. And it seems so simple, but I hear so many people saying one day, someday, sometime soon, or maybe I'll try. And I always say, well, there's no one day or someday, and there is no try. There is only do or do not, which of course I stole off Yoda, sorry. But I just feel that people just put everything on hold because they're waiting for perfection. They're waiting for the right timing. They're waiting for some sign of magic, and nobody else has the permission to tell you when to start but yourself. So, if anything, my biggest piece of advice is to just start in whatever form it is and learn and go from there, because you'll be 99% ahead of anybody else who is still sitting there on their sofa going, I have this great dream for a cafe in 5 years' time. You'll be so far ahead of that, and you
Yeah.
will look back and go, God damn it, I'm really excited that I started when I did.
It's very true. You need to begin to get anywhere. And there are so many people out there who will say, one day I will do it. I will be a superstar. And then one day they wake up and they're 70 years old and they thought, I
Mm.
missed I missed my chance about 40 years ago.
Yeah, the superstar stage is no longer for me. I can't.
Yeah, kind of reached the tether. Well, thank you very much, Natalie. I think you've given us some fine advice. It's been an absolute pleasure to welcome you today, and I hope you have a fantastic time in Amsterdam and get some good food.
Thank you. I will. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, and thank you, viewer, for watching.